A disability is something that has a major impact on your life.
Every disability is different.
And it's never the same thing for two people. I am blind in my right eye totally and partially sighted in my left eye.
I was 18 years old. We were traveling way too fast on a gravel road. Broke my neck, my back.
My Asperger's syndrome and my cerebral palsy.
I have anxiety and depression. People would have no idea just talking to me.
Being independent means different things to different people.
I want to live in my own house. I want to pay my own bills.
Live independently and not rely on other people.
When someone is not able to live as independently as they can, it does have a detrimental effect on people's physical and mental well-being.
It's no complicated thing. It's just that people with disabilities want to be included.
Plenty of people get stuck in ruts when they feel like they can't overcome something in their life. That's where Lift comes in.
Living independently for today and tomorrow. Lift. We help people of all ages and all types of disabilities find the resources or acquire the skills to live as independently as possible.
We serve the southeastern 18 counties here at the Billings office. We have a variety of things that we offer. We can help with grant funding for adaptive equipment.
Maybe a home modification so they're able to access their home. We help people to find that funding.
Helping people apply for Social Security benefits.
Medicaid, Medicare, housing.
They have a peer support group. Peer support, I think, is key.
Sharing life experiences is one of the most powerful things to help people who might be new to disability, who might be struggling with their disability.
Youth transitions is kids that are transitioning out of high school. They need to learn those adulting skills. It might be rent an apartment, learn how to grocery shop, budgeting.
Help someone advocate for themselves in a school or an employment setting. One of our biggest strengths is providing folks with information and referral. If we can't help you, we hope to know who can.
A lot of times we'll have a potential consumer call in and they think that they just have one need, and it turns out that we end up finding 3 or 4 things we can actually do for them.
You can just come in and say, hey, I feel like I have this going on. Can you help me? And we can, which is so cool to me. I love that.
Most of us on staff at Lift have identified ourselves as having one or more disabilities. That is helpful in many cases.
It's easier to empathize with someone when you yourself have struggled with a disability.
This is what we specialize in. This is who we are, and this is what we do.
And it costs nothing to go to Lift. It's a nonprofit organization and they're there to help.
Somebody that was a consumer that was working with Lift was asked to do an art project. He visualized that the balloon helps to lift people up. And then it became the logo, and it's stuck.
There's been success on all kinds of levels.
It's really rewarding to have a consumer go, hey, I was able to do this by myself today.
We want people to live their best life as independent as possible.
Live as everyone else in society and live as a part of society, not apart from society.
Everybody needs help. Sometimes you just need a little more help, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
There's plenty of life to live still, and there's a way you can do it. Keep chipping away at it, little by little by little.
Knowledge is power. Let's share it, for crying out loud.
Send us an email, give us a call. We'll do our best to help.
We can definitely help figure out what your needs are and get started on that. We're one of many steps in the path to independence, and we're happy to be serving people here in the community.
Good day and welcome to Living Well in Montana. Living Well in Montana is a program of living independently for today and tomorrow, or LIFT, LIFTT, as we call ourselves. LIFT is a non-profit, what is called a Center for Independent Living, which means we are a center for resources and advocacy for people with disabilities of all ages and all types of disabilities, and we serve an 18-county service area in southeastern and south central Montana. My name is Jed Barton, and it is my privilege to be a public relations and government affairs specialist here at LIFT and the host of today's program. Today's topic is one that sort of not only applies to folks with disabilities, but applies to everybody out there. And that is the topic of resiliency. The idea that we can take whatever comes in front of us and manage to deal with it, I think would be a fair description of resiliency. Our guest today, Don Wetzel Jr. of Identity Inc., correct?
Yes.
It draws on his experience both as a member of the Native American community and as part of the tradition of Montana athletics. To present a presentation that a couple of LIFT team members have heard recently on resiliency, and I believe it's called Journey Through Resiliency. Is that correct, Don?
Yes.
And he joins us today. Don, why don't you go ahead and we'll just start sort of flesh out that definition of resiliency I gave.
Yeah. So thank you for allowing me to come to your show, Jed, and be able to say a few things. I appreciate the opportunity. I think I come from the Blackfeet Tribal Nation, and I grew up in Browning, Montana, born and raised up there, and moved throughout the state of Montana. And I think, you go through life and you go through obstacles, you go through things that kind of where I was leaning in this discussion is around my athletic career and what sports teaches us and how sports connects to some of our traditional warrior beliefs and values as Blackfeet people and really all people of an indigenous nature. Through that journey, you start to realize that our life is like a heartbeat. It's got its ups and downs, and sometimes those downs are pretty heavy, but they actually make us stronger. And, you can't always have straight ups in life, and how coming through various things, you can become better at whatever it is you're thinking or working on within yourself. So athletically, you do that, say somebody beats me one-on-one, I got to go work on my game in something that they expose. So it's like, I think through this journey I've been on, I've used those lessons throughout my life. And so you can't grow without the hardships and pain and the failures that we have. And I think that strength that it develops within us is something that we don't look at too much. And I stick to sports in this realm because I also have worked in suicide prevention for the last 20 years. And a lot of my philosophy and the way I work around such things, I try to find the hope, the light, anything to pull somebody out of a suicidal ideation. So it's all kind of tied together that we all have these things within us. And without them, if we were on cruise control our whole life, there wouldn't be much growth. So looking at the downs that help make us stronger and help us become more well-rounded individuals, with some grit and some desire to move forward and better ourselves. That's kind of the direction of resiliency, and in the way I've kind of worked that into my life.
Okay. You mentioned athletics being a big part of your life. You played basketball at Browning High School and then in college, correct? Or
No, I played all sports in high school, and I actually went to 3 high schools. You talk about being resilient, you know. So I had to have some kind of, I guess, foundation, and it was always athletics for me because I'm pretty introverted anyways, pretty shy. And once we moved out of the Browning area, we lived all over the place. And I went to 3 high schools, and I played sports. I think from an 8-year-old on, I was in baseball, track, football, basketball. So I played all sports and then went and got a scholarship to play at Eastern Montana College, and it later turned to MSUB while I was there. So that's where I was at, is
Okay.
playing college ball there.
okay. I was a sports editor at MSUB for the student newspaper. So
Excellent.
yeah. So you talk about working in suicide prevention. Mental health is obviously, and mental health disabilities are obviously something we see a lot of here at LIFT. Was it a personal connection that brought you to the work of suicide prevention?
Yeah, at the time I was working at the Montana Wyoming Tribal Leaders Council, and you know, I graduated out of Harlem, which is right there at the Fort Belknap Reservation. And you know, just in life, one thing that you really realize when I lived on the reservation growing up, and then when I went back to the reservation, there is a lot of loss and there's a lot of grief. And when you leave those areas, you see that, you know, it isn't normal when, like, I'm sitting in Billings, and you don't go through that as much. And you start to look around and say, yeah, that ain't normal that we lose so many. There's so much grief and heartache. And when this SAMHSA grant came, when I was working at Tribal Leaders Council, I brought up some actual life experiences, you know, with my friends or losing friends, not just to suicide, but just the loss. And I gave a pretty confirming aspect of the reality that some of us face, that higher level approaches don't reach. And so I spoke up about such things, and our director at the time asked me to run that grant, and we called it the Planting Seeds of Hope. So it was all kind of tapped into, I think, my experience in life and really my belief in our tribal nations. And I can kind of speak on that a little bit. When I grew up in Browning, my father was a coach. My grandfather was a former chairman, and my great uncle Earl Barlow was a superintendent. So I had very high level mentors around me. And when I was there, I never seen our Blackfeet Nation lose. I think during the time I was there 8 years, and they won 7 state titles. So, you know, you imagine yourself growing up around that world. My belief system in our tribal nations is top of the tops because I grew up like that, you know. So getting back to some of the things that I've been looking at is with suicide prevention, I would always tap into the warrior instincts because I worked in 8 tribal nations. So tapping into an individual with suicidal ideation might mean, who's your family? Where do you come from? You know, you come from chief. There's bloods of the chief inside of your veins. Your DNA is strong. Your people got through so much, and here we are today because of them. Let's tap into that. And so very coach driven, you know, kind of in a way, but that was always my philosophy, is tapping into that strength that we all have to get through these ups and downs of life.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've worked with all of the tribal nations in Montana, including
Yes.
LIFT service area includes the northern Cheyenne and Crow reservations, but obviously with Billings being the center of our service area, we see folks from all of the nations of what is now Montana and now Wyoming. The cross-cultural nature of that, one of the things I've learned in this job is that, there are some things that are similar and there are some things that are different between each culture, and you've got to make sure you know a little bit about everybody and what's going on to make sure that you don't, I won't even say offend, I'll say step on the wrong toes. And I think that's true with any community, but I think drawing on a lot of what you said, drawing on, maybe ancestral past or, examples in the disability community. Obviously, we have folks, we use a peer model at times where, again, here's somebody who's been down the road of whether it's a mental health disability or a physical disability or a developmental disability. Here is somebody who has made their way down that road, and it's obviously different for each individual, but what can those of us who are not Native American, I guess, learn from your culture and learn with your culture about the individual resiliency of the people and the historical resiliency as well. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is I'm Blackfeet, German, and Irish. And my mother's side is 7th generation out in the Bitterroot Valley, Missoula region. And my father, of course, is 1000 generation in the Blackfeet, our territories, our original territories. There's so many similarity amongst all of us. And I think kind of what you're talking about is our identity. How do we identify ourselves? What makes us who we are? What's our value systems? Are we letting outsiders define us? Or are we defining ourselves through the strength and the journey and experience that we have within us? And so I think when you tap into such things as our traditional ways of being as Indigenous people to the, northern continent of America, you can go back. It doesn't matter where you're from. You could go back to your original Indigenous lands, and land is very important. It's like I'm also Irish. I know that over there that they have their traditions, their languages, their songs, their dances. They went through the same things our tribes did. People tried to knock that stuff out, to disconnect them from their roots, and they've held the ground. And there is this revitalization of Indigenous connectedness to who and what we are. It's like with America, I think the beauty of America is we took a shot at something that nobody has ever tried and brought all these different nationalities and groups together. And then maybe the problem with America is we don't have a foundation in those Indigenous values that we may hold like overseas. We have the benefit here that to be Indigenous to this continent, we have those values here, but tapping into that doesn't take much. If you're interested, everybody can live the way they want to live. But I think when you start to understand your heritage, it's like my wife. My wife had researched her family tree, and she's Irish as well. Her great-great-great-grandfather in the mid-1800s was arrested for teaching his language and culture in Ireland. And they threw him they were going to send him down to Australia, and he jumped ship and ends up in Butte, Montana. So what is the similarities of that to our tribal nations? I mean, they brought the boarding schools and various things like that, but we've held the ground, and we're still connected to our land. For Blackfeet, all of our stories come from those mountains, you know, and our territory was mainly the whole side, the whole Montana up into Canada, you know, big territory. And we always maintained that territory because we led with love of ourselves first and foremost, and then love of our family and love of our people and the relationships that we build with each other. So I think when we start to look at how do you tap into these ingrained strengths inside of us, it doesn't take much to dig into your history of who and what you are, and identify the power and strength to be sitting where you're sitting today. It's kind of like there's different ways of explaining it, but seventh generation understandings is I am standing here because of the 7 generations before me. I didn't just get here out of nowhere. I got here through their resilience. If they gave up, I wouldn't be here. So I'm on their shoulders, and it's up to me to live in a good way that every generation going forward, my children, their children, so on and so forth, I live in a good way that I impact them. And I share the values. I share the worth of being a good human. And so tapping into your heritage of who and what you are is a beautiful thing, you know, and it can lead to more understandings of others around you when you're really centered in your identity, no matter what it is, you know. So that's kind of like, I think we all have that ability to maybe go across the ocean and see your homelands, identify where your ancestors came from, and go stand on that farm or that mountain. You will feel it, you know. So,
and again, to bring it to disability, we have sort of we talk about developing a disability culture and a disability history, and you know, there isn't necessarily a country somewhere that we all came from. That's one of the beauties of disability, is it's the largest minority group, and it's the only one that any person can join at any moment.
Yeah,
I like to say. And but we do have the Montana Youth Leadership Forum has a wonderful display that they bring around the state occasionally on the history of disability going back to ancient times across various places, and you know, so that we, much like the native folks or the Irish or the English or anybody, you know, we have our stories and our understanding, and it's so yeah, I think what you've said here is very powerful, and I'd like to thank you for spending some time with us. And again, how do people connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, you can. Should I just give you my email?
Yeah, you can give the email address or a phone number, whatever you'd like, a website.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the email. It's just identityincmt@gmail.com.
All right.
And the ink is INCMT for Montana. So identityincmontana@gmail.com.
All right. That Don Wetzel of Identity Inc., amongst many other hats you wear, Montana Indian Sports Hall of Fame is one of your projects as well, correct?
Indian Athletic Hall of Fame. Yep.
All right. Yep. So Don, thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Jed Barton, and this has been Living Well in Montana, a program of living independently for today and tomorrow. And you can find out more about Lyft either by visiting our website, liftt.org, or by giving us a call in Billings at 406-259-5181, or at our Glendive office, 406-948-8500. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.